Hey everyone, I'm Zach Rynes. You may know me best as ChainLinkGod on Twitter. I'm joined by the one and only Sergey Nazarov to talk about some industry trends and Chainlink in general. Welcome, Sergey. How are you?
Thank you, Zach. I'm very good.
Glad to hear that. So I come from the Chainlink crypto Twitter community where there's a lot of frogs, and I've been a frog for many years. Did you expect Chainlink to have a community of frogs? Like, what are your general thoughts on the community itself and how it's evolved over time?
No, I definitely didn't expect it. It was something where it organically evolved because I think a number of people in that community understood the promise of the technology behind Oracle networks. And they saw kind of the same thing I saw about the importance of Oracle networks, initially for data and then for more and more things. And I think it was just a part of the world where people had this understanding. So it naturally grew out of that subset of people into its own community, for which I've always been really, really grateful for. My view is that I'm supposed to be focused on generating high quality technology, getting high quality inputs and outputs from the system, having great team members join and work on it, collaborating with users, banks, and others. And the community is kind of a big help in how they give feedback, interact with other people in the larger crypto community, explain what Chainlink does to them, and just generally supports us and the whole team in productive ways. So I think it was completely organic and serendipitous. I didn't do much to create it, but I'm very, very grateful for it. It's really great to have other people interested in the technology that you're creating and the systems that you're working with. And I think it's a great thing. And I really feel the positive support of many of the community members. And it's one of the things that's kept me going through the years.
That's good to hear. And I think the enthusiast community, there's a flywheel effect with the technical community where the enthusiasts will educate people about the vision of Chainlink, what it's useful, what it could be used for. That incentivizes or at least gets the attention of developers and they start building. That allows the enthusiast community to get more excited. Do you see this kind of like flywheel effect between these different segments in the community? Do you think that's been helpful in terms of helping making Chainlink a standard?
Yeah, it's immensely valuable. To have a standard, you need folks to use it, and one of the best ways to get them to use it is to have them educated about it. And the developer community and the Chainlink community and the crypto community kind of all overlap and intersect. And so the Chainlink community's ability to educate both technical, non-technical folks, attend meetups, basically educate both the whole crypto community and the whole developer community has been immensely useful and positive for getting Chainlink adopted and becoming a standard, clarifying a lot of different things about how everything works. You know, you've been doing a great job with that. A lot of other community members have also been together with you making clarity happen, basically, about various topics in the Twitterverse and various other platforms. And yeah, that helps people understand the system, see its benefits, see its security guarantees, understand what it provides to the ecosystem, understand what it provides to users, and yeah, it just generally helps adoption and usage of the system by developers and others. So I think it's a great thing. It's a immensely valuable kind of dynamic that helps Chainlink become and remain as a standard, especially as a standard that's seen as being secure, because the security of it is consistently explained by a number of knowledgeable, thoughtful people like yourself.
I've been across different crypto ecosystems and communities, and there's nothing like the Chainlink community in many ways, for good and worse, but mostly for better. I think our community has had a very strong rallying effect. In terms of broader trends in 2024 for crypto, what do you think is the primary trend that you foresee happening in 2024, or that you're most excited to happen this year?
I think the capital markets have so much value that even if a small percentage of that value flows on-chain and then eventually makes its way towards public chains, then that's going to massively increase what the whole blockchain industry is about. And I think we're at the early stages of that extremely large market. So that is a very big opportunity, not only for connecting all the different bank chains together, but eventually connecting them to the public chains to allow the whole crypto ecosystem to grow. I think people are just starting to understand this with the appearance of things like the Bitcoin ETF. Like they're just starting to understand that the global financial system all those institutions and users and others have a big role to play in helping grow the whole crypto economy, and to be part of it, and that they want to be part of it, and they could be a value-added member of the whole industry. And creating the technology to allow that to happen is also very important, and that's what Chainlink has been doing for Web3 to interact with each other on the basis of data and connectivity. But doing that for the capital markets, even if it's just for the capital markets, is already very valuable. But the ability to connect the capital markets to Web3 and to create the single internet of contracts, even if that trend is just getting going this year, I think it's immensely powerful and important. In addition to all of the trends you see in Web3, DeFi, GameFi, and others, those are still places that Chainlink is very active in, the global standard for data, powering DeFi, and so on. And so I really just see both parts of the crypto ecosystem growing at the same time, the on-chain, public chain part, and the capital markets bank part. And then initially they grow separately with their own user bases and their own kind of transactional standards and their own legal requirements and so on. But eventually they converge into a single internet of contracts. And I think this is the year when that trend doesn't necessarily happen this year, but it begins getting on a trajectory to happen.
Do you think that the tokenization of finance was always inevitable? I think there's a perception that crypto would replace the banks, but I think that's a pretty unlikely situation versus institutions using tokenization and blockchains to improve their processes. But do you think this was just always the inevitable next step from paper contracts, digital centralized systems, to digital decentralized systems? If blockchains didn't exist, would it be a different type of tokenization? Is this totally out of left field, or things were kind of trending this way and blockchains are the best technology to do this?
I think blockchains have created a cryptographically guaranteed form of ownership in the case of tokenizations. In the case of real-world asset tokenization, you're actually creating more advanced assets that actually give you other guarantees beyond ownership. But I think that the blockchain and the public chain crypto world has created a big enough global market worth over $1.5 trillion in value right now that is big enough to attract the banks, right? So the banks are always going to participate in the markets that they think are lucrative. And the public blockchain community has done such a great job at creating a market and a movement and a kind of logic and a philosophy around ownership and a philosophy around self-determinism and cryptographically guaranteed relationships that is appealing enough now to enough people that it's a big enough market that market reaches in and touches the capital markets. So the thing that's happening is that the public blockchain world has done such a great job at creating a stream of adoption and a stream of users that it's impossible to ignore at these numbers. Personally, I think it became impossible to ignore when we crossed 200 billion. So $1.5 trillion is definitely impossible to ignore. And so that's why you see the largest asset managers making ETFs about cryptocurrencies. It's because it's just another asset for them to participate in. Now, the tokenization of all the financial products is really them kind of looking to see if their clients want a tokenized version of something. If their infrastructures are stable, if their brands remain intact, if a bunch of them aren't insolvent, then their clients already deal with them. They already know them. They will probably continue to deal with them as long as they offer them this tokenization digital asset thing. So that's one way the world evolves, right? The one way the world evolves is the markets are relatively stable, there's few insolvencies, asset management, bank brands maintain their ability to have a relationship with clients, and they gradually offer them digital assets, blockchain-based tokenization things. That's kind of the world things are going towards now because the global macro environment, the interest rates, all of these things are like reaching a certain level of stability. That's one world. In that world, what you basically have is a bunch of assets being turned into on-chain things, and those on-chain things eventually going to become public chain things. So it's actually net beneficial for our industry because it just means that to a certain degree, they become the public blockchain industry. So that's one way it happens. The other way it could happen is if various asset managers, banks, for whatever collection of reasons, become insolvent, become unusable, become untrustworthy. There's a crisis of faith about the brands and the capabilities of asset managers and banks. Then all the technologies that define Web3 will start to be used by basically fintechs and various startups, people like PayPal and all these kind of financial technology companies, for them to come along and say, I want to replace the banks. And I'm going to do it because I have the best thing. And Aave is going to be one of those, and GMX is going to be one of those, and a various number of other protocols are going to be those. And they're all going to compete for getting all the value that decided to leave banks and asset managers because they had a failure like that. What I can't predict is which of those two worlds will we be in and when, right? Will we continue in the steady state world where the macroeconomic environment, interest rates, global economic stability is largely unchanged, and therefore people feel comfortable dealing with large asset managers? Or are we going to get into a world of like a sovereign debt crisis and various other economic failures, insolvency events for various institutions, and there's like an en masse exodus from institutions, and maybe an en masse migration to cryptographically guaranteed Web3 systems, like lending protocols, various fintech blockchain-based products. In that world, more value leaves banks and goes onto what we would consider Web3. But actually in both worlds, you end up having a lot of on-chain, public chain assets. They just arrive there through a different path. But the destination will be the same. It will be all the world's assets on-chain interacting with each other in a single internet of contracts with a single set of data standards and connectivity standards, which is what Chainlink is seeking to provide.
And my thinking or my assumption is that it would probably happen, these failures, if they happen regionally, probably maybe in developing nations or maybe in developed nations. Like, do you see it being a cascading effect where one nation has issues and they convert into a Web3 or on-chain format, then other nations are forced to also start going that direction? Or is it kind of something in that failure scenario, it would happen globally?
I think it's really hard to predict. It's like asking to predict the 2008 financial crisis, and that was going to come from the residential markets. Like only a few people were able to predict that, and the majority of people would look at the metrics on, commercial real estate, residential real estate, and they would say, looks pretty healthy, looks fine. It's very hard to predict where system failures and financial failures come from, because it's kind of pretty different every time, because the past one that happened got patched up, right? So the past thing that happened got patched up, and it's much less likely that's going to happen. It'll be some like new version of a failure that has a similar pattern, but it happens differently in a different place. And that's very hard to predict. Yeah, I don't know if failures like this would come from the emerging markets or will come from the developed economies based on debt ratios or sovereign debt issues. These are all just theories you could have. I just know that there's kind of these two paths. One path is that the public chain world keeps growing. It goes from 1.5 trillion to 2 trillion to 3 trillion to 5 trillion. Then banks start competing, probably increases significantly from there. And then the other world is the banks have some set of failures, and people decide, a large percentage of their clients decide that the banking relationship is risky, right? Because they didn't manage that risk, and there was an insolvency event like Silicon Valley Bank, right? Silicon Valley Bank is a bank used and run and advised by really smart people, but it went into insolvency. 2 weeks before Silicon Valley Bank went into insolvency, you would ask anyone, do you think Silicon Valley Bank is good? They would say, yeah, it's probably one of the top banks, one of the lowest risk things, and all these great people have their money in there, and we should consider it really reliable. And there you go, right? It's insolvent and it has to get bailed out and all this stuff, right? So it's really hard to predict this, but I know that I believe that if that were to happen, then all the Web3 stuff that you and me know as Web3 would be, maybe if not immediately, on a certain time span viewed as an alternative.
So in a world where there is inevitably either thousands of public chains and or thousands of different bank chains, how do you see Chainlink as a platform to scale to match the demand from all those different environments, like in the context of CCIP or in the context of another service or just in the context of the Chainlink platform itself? If there's thousands of networks, how do you see Chainlink as a platform itself scaling to meet that?
So it's really a need to connect to all those chains. It's a need to connect to all the data sources that all the contracts need in order to do their transactions, to do their settlements, to do their identity kind of proofs to prove that they can actually interact with each other. So there's pretty much just a huge amount of integration that needs to happen. And Chainlink is on track to be very widely integrated. It's very widely integrated for consuming data, for providing data from various data sources. It's widely integrated for various computations, and it's increasingly integrated for all the cross-chain interactions that both public chains and bank chains need to have with each other. And all of these interactions are kind of similar, basically. So Chainlink should be a generic, general-purpose system for all data to move into and out of blockchains, and all data to move between blockchains. And if you expand the definition of data to include tokens and to include those things, like you can think of a token as a piece of data about something, then it can cover all the price data, all the identity data, and all the token related data, which is like basically token movements. And then it also has a kind of computational layer that adds levels of computation that blockchains don't have but need in order to function well, like automation and functions and others. So I think that the real challenge is to get it widely integrated, but the incentive to integrate Chainlink is very high, because when you integrate the Chainlink system, you get so many different services and systems, right? You get all kinds of data, you get all kinds of computation, you get all kinds of connectivity. And so if you're going to spend your effort to integrate a single system, it's very worth it to do Chainlink, because you get a huge variety of all these different capabilities. Whereas if you integrate 3 separate systems that do these, 3 separate things, and then you're going to have to figure out a way to make them work together, and maybe they don't work together, and maybe one of them fails, and then your architecture fails. But the Chainlink system can give you the data, the connectivity, the computation, and everything can be packaged in a way where it already interacts well with all the different parts of both your system, and like the computational part of Chainlink interacts with the data part of Chainlink, and the data part of Chainlink can send data over the cross-chain part of Chainlink, and like all these types of things can interact correctly.
Okay, kind of to tie this all together, if somebody sees the vision of Chainlink and they see either one of these 2 paths happening, and they see Chainlink as being the standard for connecting all these chains together, as an enthusiast community member, what's the best way that they can do what's the best thing they can do to support this vision or help accelerate it wherever possible?
I think the community does a good job at educating various people in the crypto world and the Web3 world. So educating everyone in the crypto world about all the security properties of Chainlink, all the various things that it does well or the positive aspects, explaining to people the significance of security, the significance of these decisions, and how they can affect user value and the risks and the improvements and capabilities that Chainlink has and the protocol has kind of developed that other people haven't developed, and how the importance of that security and reliability is not something to be ignored, because there's still a large collection of bridge hacks, and there's a large collection of other hacks. Those hacks don't affect Chainlink because that security is there. So Chainlink as a protocol is basically providing a secure, reliable infrastructure. That's basically what it's doing. People should value security, they should understand security, and it's that valuing and understanding of security that allows end user applications to be secure, because they see their users value it, their users want security, so then they will have security, right? Because that's how their users measure them. So making sure the community understands what Chainlink does, its security, the importance of that in terms of applications having that security. Those are hugely important things. There's all kinds of great supportive things that the community does. There's meetups, there's technical contributions, there's all kinds of events. Basically, I think one of the best things that the community can do is have various creative, productive ways to grow the community, right? So the more people that understand what Chainlink does, the more people we educate from Web2 or the capital markets to come in and understand, the more developers that understand the value of the system, the more all of these people join the Chainlink community, the bigger it is and the more attractive it is, and kind of basically the better that is for Chainlink as being seen as a standard, because more and more people are supporting it. And I'm very grateful to the community and to you for all the time and effort it takes to explain all this stuff and clarify everything and make sure people understand the value of security and make sure that any misunderstandings or any pieces of misinformation are corrected. And that's extremely valuable. So I'm very much deeply grateful to you, to the community, and to everybody that's been doing that over many years. It's something I don't spend a lot of time on because I know that there are other people doing a great job at making that clarity happen. My role and other Chainlink Labs team member roles and community member roles, I think, is really to make the system something that's secure so that when it's explained, it makes sense, right? It's explained and makes sense that this is the security model, this is the architecture that was chosen, this is why these trade-offs exist, and these trade-offs are actually in the best interest of your protocol or your system, and the ability for people to understand that is important. It's what leads them to want to adopt the security. So I think the community has an extremely important role to play in that.
I'm very aligned with your opinion here, and thank you for the kind words. I've spent many years in the Chainlink ecosystems. I've seen many different flavors of community members, and the ones that I think have helped drive the most value for the ecosystem, those who just want to educate and those who want to teach, those who are just giving so much information, correcting misinformation wherever it is, but mostly whatever formats that they're good at, whether it's creating memes, whether it's doing Twitter Spaces, doing podcasts, writing blogs, whatever you're good at, that's extremely beneficial for the Chainlink ecosystem. And so I would be more than happy if there were 1 million CLG type entities on Twitter. I would consider that a huge success for our community, because I do think the more community people spreading the Chainlink vision and driving developers to go build solutions for Chainlink is what ultimately reinforces Chainlink as a standard. If the Chainlink community didn't exist, I think it'd be a lot harder for Chainlink to become a standard if you don't have this whole ecosystem of enthusiasts and developers, because build it and they will come is not really a thing. You have to go tell them why this infrastructure is useful, in addition to the infrastructure actually being useful.
So yeah, one of the other things that I think is important is the positivity that comes through in some of our community members to show people that there's a long-term path here that isn't about every near-term thing or every near-term problem. The word enthusiast has enthusiasm in it. And generally speaking, I think being enthusiastic and positive and immune to whatever problems might come up is a very useful and positive aspect of a big part of the community, where I think it's clear that our goal is not just to optimize for every short-term thing. Our goal is to make sure that the most critical capabilities and features are there and secure. And so that understanding is, I think, also very important, because we're really on a long-term path here to creating something that not only has enabled over 9.6 trillion in transaction value, but could eventually enable way more than that. So you could be adding multiple zeros to that if the system is built correctly. And the understanding of that and the support of that is also very important.
And one thing to add on to that is, in order to build, the best positioning for a project to be in is that once institutions start to step in and start to use infrastructure, they're going to use what's already being used and what's already standardized. And so becoming the standard now and within Web3 is extremely beneficial, but Web3 is still, relatively speaking, smaller. So best case scenario, all the banks step in tomorrow and start tokenizing their assets, and it just happens tonight. But as I'm sure you know, institutions don't move that quickly. So just the fact that Chainlink has become the standard today within Web3 sets up a good case for Chainlink to also naturally become the standard within the institutional on-chain finance space, whatever you want to call it, as well. So it's a well choreographed dance move, effectively, to become the standard today, so you can continue to be the standard when the inflection point of institutional adoption actually happens. It's naturally a long-term game. Ideally, everything could happen in the short term. That would be fantastic, but the world's unpredictable, and so just becoming the standard now is extremely crucial. And then every other little thing that may not be perfect becomes minuscule when you become the standard. Any issues that exist can be easily solvable at that point when everyone's using your technology.
Yeah, and we are actually already on track to be in certain parts of the global financial markets and the capital markets a standard. So the kind of process and the technology and the security dynamics that we used to become the standard in Web3 and for the protocol to be valuable and useful for blockchains and smart contracts in Web3, 80% of that carries over to capital markets. We have the best security track record. We have the most amount of value secured by far of anyone. But beyond that, we've also in the background been working for many, many years with top financial market infrastructure, banks, asset managers. So we're actually kind of on the way already to be that standard in both places. And yeah, you're right, that being that standard and having all that production usage definitely helps you gain adoption to capital markets. But there's already been a parallel process for many years to become the standard there as well. That part of the digital asset blockchain world just hasn't been moving fast enough. And now it's accelerating.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it does feel like over the past year, institutional interest in blockchains and smart contracts and CCIP in particular is just accelerated. So it's happening. Institutions move slow, but when things happen, they inevitably happen.
Yeah, I think the kind of direction we're working towards, the technology we're making, the blockchain industry, digital assets, all of that is inevitable. Absolutely. On the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergey.